All right. Good evening. Good evening. As I always say, I am the resident Sephardic Yeki. So it's 7:29. I think we're really going to begin. It's really crazy. This I can't believe it. First of all, last year I wasn't even part of this program, and it was very sad for me. I mean, it really animates so much of my life, and my students love it. It's really quite amazing. This whole amazing shiur, this whole program is an honor of, obviously, in memory of Aaron Tambor Morris Grunstein by Chani Len Grunstein. It's really quite amazing. I know, 7:30 on the dot. Amazing. And I really thank you so much for the sponsorship. It's really amazing that our synagogue has such high-level learning. It's really incredible. So tonight, I have, first of all, the unenviable task of speaking to my in-laws and also my son, Chaim. I can't believe it. Normally, he's at home watching on the screen. He's here today. I don't know, he doesn't hear from me enough. It's crazy. He might be the youngest member here by 9 years old. He's amazing. So it's my task tonight. 10, of course I remember. Of course. So it's my task tonight to talk about a forgotten part of the Abarbanel's history. This is a part of the Abarbanel that really no one really talks about. This is a thing that is actually very much shrouded in mystery. And we have to really discuss why that's the case and really give the entire historic reasons why that might be the case. So we're going to talk tonight about the grandson of Don Isaac Abarbanel. And this is a shocking outcome of this year. Is going to be how interesting the difference is in terms of the fluidity between Christianity and Judaism during this time. It's downright shocking to us, as we know, someone going off to Christianity. For many, many people, we all know in Shulchan Aruch, it's brought down, all about sitting Shiva. Here we're going to see it wasn't necessarily that way. And it's very, very interesting how this works out. In addition, we're going to see the varied lifetimes of the Abarbanel. He not only just lives one life, it's like he's a phoenix that rises from the ashes over and over and over again. So join me tonight. Hopefully we get to learn a lot, learn about something that usually people don't talk about. So Bezrat Hashem, we'll be together. So the Abarbanel family, they trace themselves. I always do this, my fault. I always like to say the sources because for me, nothing really starts with me. Everything I am is really based on my amazing teachers, the amazing sources I have. Number one, obviously, Bibi Netanyahu's father, Ben-Zion Netanyahu. He wrote the book. The first half is just straight history. The second half is interpretation. Very, very interesting. He very much in the second part puts in his revisionist feelings. He happened to be Jabotinsky. He was actually Jabotinsky's secretary in upstate New York, which is quite interesting, in 1940. Also, in addition, this is a book that just came out by Eric Laurie. I mean, I shouldn't say just came out, 10 years ago. I mean, compared to Netanyahu's book, it's basically yesterday. And this is also fantastic. I love this book. It's great. I highly suggest it. In addition, Rav Lopiansky from Yeshiva Greater Washington, he has an amazing shiur about it. And obviously, the amazing Rabbi Dr. Henry Abramson from Turo, he also has a great shiur. We're going to mention his other shiur also, which is also excellent. And last of all, obviously, we very much miss, last but not least, Dr. Avigail Rock. She has a fantastic shiur online. She was an amazing person, really a real dynamo. I loved going to her classes. And Baruch Hashem, I get to quote from her tonight. So the Abarbanel family, they trace themselves. Oh, let's first start off with something else. My fault. So how exactly do you pronounce it? So if you look at the books, it's Abarbanel, Abravanel, Bravanel, Habravanel, Barbanel. How exactly is it pronounced? So we obviously have the wine over here, but I'm going to go with my Gedolim, who are Shlach Rock, obviously. Oh, man. Oh, yeah. I love the clothing. Oh, they're too good. So I'm going to go with how they say it, Abarbanel. That's how we're going to go with it. Not so scholarly, but we'll take it. The Abarbanel family over here, they trace themselves to David HaMelech. Now, the real question is, can anyone really trace themselves to David HaMelech? We know Rashi's family has a tradition, but the key part is tradition. Is it really, historically accurate? That's the real question, but that's not the part I care about. The part that we should care about is, did the family themselves consider themselves to be from David HaMelech? And the answer is a resounding yes. And that's a big deal, because that means that this family has a royal bearing. It means that they view themselves to be, really, as we're going to say over and over again, the top 1%. They are very, very special in a time where it was very difficult to be special. They were the most special, and they were amazing. However, and this also is something that's shrouded in mystery, the Abarbanel's grandfather, his name was Shemuel. And there's all these different stories about this, that it might turn out, and once again, I need to preface everything by, I'm hiding behind these books very strongly. It might turn out that he converted to Christianity. Now, there's two different camps about this. On the one hand, it's very simple. It was a time of shmad. It was a time where if you didn't accept Christianity, then you would be killed. And therefore, like many other Jews who thought it was just a passing fad, that one day you just pretend to be Christian, the next day you go back to your Judaism, maybe that's how it worked for the Abarbanel's grandfather. That's one way. And in fact, there's all these legends that say he ended up later on moving from Spain to Lisbon and eventually returning to his Judaism. However, Dr. Laurie has in a footnote over here from Netanyahu where he says no. He says this was actually before the persecution of 1391. And in fact, the reason why he converted was because all the members of the court who were Jewish were bothering him. And a way to get away from all of this was by converting. Now, like I always say, it's like it's like a shmorg. If you like one thing, you don't like another thing, I'm telling you, you could just leave it. So over here, there are these two different positions, and I think it's important to bring this down. What is interesting is that Abarbanel never, ever talks about this conversion, whether it was a forced conversion or whether or not it was done really out of, I would guess, say expediency. So, what exactly happened in 1391? What exactly happened in 1391? So this over here I just found. Excellent.
And so begin the events that marked the beginning of the end of Jewish life in Spain. A series of massacres.
They begin in Seville in 1391, where there's an attack on the Jewish community that first starts on Easter and then is frustrated and picks up again a few weeks later. As the rumor of that massacre spreads, the same is done in cities all over large parts of Spain. For example, in Valencia, Barcelona, and Girona, big centers of Jewish population.
Thousands of Jews were forced to convert to Christianity or be slaughtered.
The coming of the Black Death was something new to Europe, a kind of scourge of God, which needed explanation and precipitated a massive crisis, of course. When a third of the population died, you need an explanation. And you tend to think, if you're thinking in Christian terms, in messianic terms, in apocalyptic terms. And the apocalypse is meant to bring with it certain kinds of events, including the massacre and mass conversion of the remaining Jews of the world. So in some ways, 1391 is an attempt to hasten or to participate in the apocalypse by forcing the conversion of the Jews.
Though Jews would remain in Spain for another century, the golden age of Jewish participation in Spanish society was over.
So in 1391, a cleric in Spain named Ferdinando Martinez, he for a decade before had stirred up a tremendous amount of Jewish hate. And even though he was censured by the church, and even though there was protection from the monarchy, this is something that's very surprising to people, he was running very similar to what we know now what's going on in different mobs. They're different mobs. And here, there were mobs that went through and were unfortunately causing Jews to convert by force. And these were roving mobs. They were not actually sanctioned by the church. Not at all. In fact, quite the opposite. The church did not want this to happen. However, there was just so much of a mob mentality that unfortunately what happened is that these Jews were forced to convert. And this is in 1391. And as the video says so beautifully, this was really the end. This is really the end of the golden age of Spain. Many people don't realize this. They think that 1492, if you read Netanyahu's other book about Spain in 1492, he discusses that really things were done already by 1391. In fact, we have a family tradition. My last name is Kassorla. Our family tradition is our family left in 1391 to leave this type of persecution. And even many, many great Gedolim actually ended up falling with this, including, according to many, the great Rivash. The great Rivash was one of the greatest Rishonim. According to some sources, he did convert. According to some sources, he converted, which, as we know, for one of the Rishonim to even think that he would convert to Christianity, that seems so beyond the pale. And that's why Dr. Mark Shapiro, in an article on Sfarim blog, he says he does not think that is particularly, he does not agree with it. However, it is interesting to understand that at least the idea that the Rivash could have maybe converted, that just shows how bad things were, and that shows how it really affected everybody. And it was so, so bad that in many places there did not remain any Jews at all. Not at all. Martinez, when he was sanctioned by the king said, "You can't preach anymore." And he said, "I don't care." And he continued doing it. And he said, "The king has no power over me. Only God is really, and the church, the true church, really is in charge of me." And therefore he continued his vitriol against the Jews. And what happened was you had these roving bands of people, of these Christians, forcing Jews to convert. But this is the part that's crazy. What's crazy is that on certain streets, you can have a roving mob of people, and they force someone to convert. What exactly is the status of that conversion? What exactly does it mean for that Jewish person that was forced to become Christian? Are they actually Christian according to Catholic law? And then you could have someone from the exact same family also be walking on a different street, and the mob doesn't go down there. And now you have two people in the exact same family. One person is a registered Catholic, and the other person is a totally from-believing Jew. And you have this weird issue going on between families and in many different areas. So, for example, in Valencia, in Barcelona, there didn't remain any more Jews. And what's crazy is how long this lasted. This lasted between 1391 and 1424. That was really open season on Jews, where Jews were forced to convert. And the question is, what was their status? So to use a bit of a Talmudic word, b'diavad, which means really not the best way, they are converts. Lechatchila, you really never should have converted these people, because us Christians don't believe in forceful conversion. However, since already it happened, now they are 100% Christian. That means they have to be registered. It means they have to be baptized. It means that they need to go to church. They are 100% Christian. They are not Jewish anymore according to Christian law. So this became so interesting, because you had some people who said, okay, this is our new reality. We're just Christian. And some people did do that. You had other people, and this is a group that has become most famous, who hid their Judaism. So you had some people who, for example, used to light Shabbat candles in their basement. You had certain people that wouldn't light anything on Shabbat, in terms of wouldn't make any sort of fire on Shabbat. You had some people that refrained from eating pork. These were really not necessarily the majority at all. Most really converted, a lot left, but then you had this interesting group of people in between. And if you're the church, what exactly is happening to these people in between? On Saturday, they go to shul, and on Sunday, they go to church. And not only that, any sort of simcha, any sort of time that they're together, anything, they're all hanging out together. And then what ends up happening? You have these Jewish people who are now influencing their family members to basically return and keep some sort of semblance of mitzvot. And therefore, what was the Spanish Inquisition? The Spanish Inquisition then was not against Jews. It was actually against the new converts who were suspected of being really not true Christians and bringing down Christianity from the inside. And the whole question about the Inquisition was not about Jews. It was not about Jews could leave. In fact, in 1492, Jews were given this option, convert or leave. But the real question was, what about these Jews who happen to be forcefully converted? They're not 100% in there. We're worried about what they're doing to our Christianity. They're taking our jobs. They're joining our society. Some of them are becoming priests. But yet, what about their fealty to Christianity? Is it there? So therefore, the Inquisition was really to root out those people. It wasn't necessarily to root out Jews. And that's why you have such interesting she'elot even from the early 1400s. So for example, there happened to be a great tzaddik named the Rashbash. The Rashbash deals with she'elah in his Shalot Teshuvot, Siman Sadi, where he talks all about how a certain family on Pesach needs to pretend to have chametz on their table just in case the inquisitors come in, and then they're in trouble. So he has all sorts of different answers of how to boil it a little bit so it doesn't totally become chametz, and on and on and on. But the real thing that we see from over here is that these are all questions that were before 1492 and even before the Inquisition was made in the 1480s. So this is already way before. So concerning the Abarbanel's grandfather's conversion, Abarbanel never ever mentions it, not at all. And Abarbanel's father ends up moving to, the golden age of Spain was over, he ends up moving instead to Lisbon. He ends up moving to Lisbon, which makes a lot of sense. Because if you remember, I know Ariella was in my social studies class. If you remember all about Henry the Navigator, Vasco da Gama, what were they? What nationality were they? They weren't Spanish. They were Portuguese. And in fact, the Portuguese were the ones who were really able to bypass, as we'll show in just a moment, to bypass the Silk Road. So if you're into the new technology and the new economy and the new world, where are you going to move to? You're not going to stay in Spain where things are horrible. Instead, you're going to move to Lisbon. Lisbon is where it's at. And therefore, his father, the Abarbanel's father, was involved in so much in Lisbon, including giving money for Henry the Navigator's brother for his wars. And he became very, very high in the court of Lisbon. And it was perfect because who was in charge at the time? Oh, here we go. Oh, yeah. So who was in charge at the time? Actually, I had a joke before. Maybe we'll hold it for later. So this is the Portuguese. The Portuguese idea was to bypass all of the areas of tax in the Arab lands and in India, and therefore sail around. And this is how they became such amazing, amazing explorers with the caravel. And they were able to bypass all of that and make so much money. They were able to make so much. And who was in charge at the time? This in 1438, there was a person named Alfonso V. And Alfonso V was extremely pro-Jewish. I shouldn't really say that. He was extremely pro-money. And the Jews were very helpful for the money. So therefore, he was the patron for the Abarbanel's father. The Abarbanel's father was a member of the court. And it was great because his reign was 40 years, which meant that Jews under his reign, they did amazing. They did so great. In the 1460s, Rav Yitzchak Abarbanel, ends up joining this court. Now, he doesn't become a rabbi, not at all. In fact, he's so special because the Abarbanel has something that no other Rishon has. He has a true classical education. You're talking about someone who knows Shas and Poskim. You're talking about someone who really knows Tanakh backwards and forwards, but yet in addition to all of this, he knows all the classics, which include rhetoric, which includes all of the famous ideas of philosophy, and he knows it all, and he's an expert in all of them. and also Shas. And also Shas. And that is very special. In addition to all of that, even at a young age, he's going around with his father, traveling all over the world, helping his father with business. What's important about this? If you're someone who's in business, you got to keep good records. You got to be extremely organized. You have to be extremely clear. Something we're going to see about the Abarbanel, when his writing really hits the world, that's what people love about it. It's clear, it's organized, there's a structure to it. It makes a lot of sense coming from where the Abarbanel comes from. So the Abarbanel was able to live where he wanted, which was a big deal because normally a Jewish person couldn't live in the Christian area. He was able to. He also contributed to Alfonso's attempt to take Castile. It didn't work, but he contributed to it. In fact, him and another Jewish person, their contribution was more than all of the Christian contributions combined. That just shows you how much money he had. And in fact, Netanyahu brings down that there were so many non-Jews who unfortunately were being malshin him to the court. They were saying such negative things about him and were very jealous of his money that unfortunately we have so many records of this about the jealousy. So the Abarbanel describes himself in the introduction to his Sefer Yoshua. Once I was in my home with the estate and wealth that I inherited from my ancestors, an abode filled with God's blessings in illustrious Lisbon, metropolis and capital of the Kingdom of Portugal. I built myself houses with wide porticos, and I made my home a meeting house for scholars. In my house and in my walls, there was a great abundance in charity, Torah and greatness. That means Torah Gedula. I was luxuriant in the court of the mighty and noble King Don Alfonso when he grew strong in his wealth. God took account of his people to give them bread. Deliverance and salvation arose for the Jews. I delighted to sit in his shade. I was close to him, and he relied upon me. We also have other records from this time that he was extremely involved in the Jewish community. He was helping so much in terms of ransoming Jews that were stolen, that were going to be sold into slavery. And he took a major role in saving these people. So one mark of Abarbanel's thought is the response to the constant barrage of intellectual issues from Christianity. This was a major theme in the Abarbanel. Now, why was this? His writings are very much a way that he shows how Pshat works. Now, what exactly is Pshat? Pshat doesn't just mean simplicity. It means how exactly do you explain it in a way where it makes sense? So at this time, Christians were mining the Bible to try to find some sort of way to convince Jews. Once already 1391 happened, you have so many Jews, according to some estimates, 50% of Jewry in Spain converted. You have so many, 100,000 people in Valencia convert. You have all these people converting. And now you want to convince them of the truth of Christianity. So where do you find that truth? In the Bible. That means if you're the Abarbanel, you got to know your Bible so well. Because who knows? You're going to meet somebody. Someone's going to bring up some sort of issue that they think, something from, I don't know, from Yechezkel, some crazy pasuk somewhere, and he has to know it very well. And not only does he have to know well, he has to be able to show that that's not true and to really show that the Jewish way is correct. This was a mark of the Abarbanel in his writings. In addition, he quotes often from Christian scholars. And not only that, he even says that when Christian scholars are right, he says it. He doesn't mind saying that, which is a very big deal, a very big deal. So as long as Alfonso V was living, life was amazing for him. Life was great. However, he ends up dying. And in 1481, his son takes over. And his son, oh, not a good guy. Oh, my. John II. He was somebody who thought that the Abarbanel was trying to come for him. There was the Duke of Brigzana, who was some sort of pretender trying to go for him. And really, they thought the Abarbanel was on the Duke's team, but in reality, not necessarily. And going back, whatever the case is, the Abarbanel is walking to the palace, and on his way, someone sees him. And someone says, do you know you're walking into a trap right now? You're about to be killed. He thinks about it, and he says, okay. He runs away, leaves his entire family, leaves everything behind. All of his books, all of his money, everything he leaves behind. And it's so sad. Think about what sort of book collection he had. Someone like him who really money was no object. He's in the top 1% of intellectuals in the world. He's in the top 1% of people who are making money. He's this huge Wall Street genius. And yet he's over here. He has to run away with nothing. And that's how he does it. He's able to later on get his family. He's able to. And he ends up going to Spain. Which we said before was kind of dead at this point. It wasn't so great. And here, let's go take a look over here. Sorry. So here we have to talk about, once again, bring up the Reconquista. And then we spoke about this really 2 times ago. We spoke all about the Ramban. Actually, last time we spoke about Rav Yaakov Sasportas. But the Reconquista was the idea that Christians need to take back Spain from the Muslims and therefore reconquer it. And this bottom area of Granada, that was the one Muslim stronghold. It was so difficult to win it. And therefore, Ferdinand and Isabella, they decided they're going to bring Abarbanel on based on someone else. There happened to be another person named Abraham Senor. We're going to go at length about Abraham Senor. Abraham Senor suggested that Abarbanel join the administration and try to fight against Granada. And this is precisely what happens. And not surprisingly, Ferdinand and Isabella win. And in 1492, they're finally able to take over the entire Iberian Peninsula. They're able to. And Rabbi Abraham Senor is even more than the Abarbanel. He is the chief rabbi of the entire Spanish Empire. And here he is. No, not that. Abraham Senor. This is Abraham Senor. This is from a fantastic shiur from Rabbi Dr. Henry Abramson. And Henry Senor suggests him to King Ferdinand and Isabella. He says, I want you guys to take him. And he does such a great job in terms of everything. Someone with all of this knowledge, someone with all of this training, somebody who knows the stock market, someone who knows the bond market, someone who knows everything. Someone like that is going to succeed even if he goes to Spain with nothing. And that's precisely what happens. He builds himself up again, he becomes wealthy again, and he becomes a famous tax farmer. And him and Abraham Senor are the 2 main rabbis on the Iberian Peninsula. However, in 1492, not only does Columbus sail the ocean blue, but this is where we talk about the Inquisition. Finally, once already the Muslims are out in 1492 out of Granada, now Ferdinand and Isabella say, now we're going to have this entire area free of any non-Catholics. Free of any non-Catholics. And this is where they make the famous edict of expulsion, where they say either you convert or you leave. That's it. Those are the only 2 options. And it's very famous. This over here is a great picture over here, where you see this was actually made in the late 1800s. And it has over here Torquemada, where you have this person, this Jewish person over here, who we're not entirely sure who it's supposed to be depicting. Is supposed to be depicting the Abarbanel? Maybe. Is it Abraham Senor? Maybe. But they're bringing this huge trunk full of money to try to convince Ferdinand and Isabella, to try to convince them to rescind the expulsion. And yet, Thomas Torquemada, he takes a cross, according to legend, and he throws it down on the table. And he says, the same way that Jesus was sold out, so too, you, Ferdinand and Isabella, are selling out Christianity. And therefore, hold strong. And he discusses so much the Abarbanel. He discusses about it. So there was a big issue. Because I wrote this as Shnei Shvilin, which means there were 2 different paths. And this is very, very sad. Because like I mentioned before, Abraham Senor, he was the senior rabbi of the entire British Empire. He's actually the shadchan to Ferdinand and Isabella. He was the one that came up with the idea. I hope he got some money for it. He did. However, he makes a very, very, very interesting choice. 3 times the Abarbanel Abraham Senor approach Ferdinand and Isabella. And they say, please rescind it, please. And every single time, Ferdinand and Isabella say, no, we're not going to rescind it. Finally, after that 3rd time, the Abarbanels realized They have to leave. But yet, Abraham Senor says, at the age of 80, I'm going to convert. And he converts to Christianity. The chief rabbi converts to Christianity. He ends up passing away in 1493, 1 year later. In fact, Benjamin Cardozo, that's what I wrote over there, he's actually an Enoklach. I don't know exactly how that works. I tried looking at Wikipedia. It wasn't helping so much. But he's actually a descendant of this Abraham Senor. Abraham Senor makes this choice. Now, Ferdinand and Isabella, they made such a very big, epic play of this. They made this public. They showed this to everybody, and they publicized it everywhere. And they were hoping that this would convince so many Jews to convert. And unfortunately, it did. Not only that, many of the Jews did not want to leave their home that they've been living in for so many centuries. They didn't want to. And they thought this would just pass in a little bit. In fact, Abarbanel writes that he didn't see this coming at all. In 1491, Abarbanel and Abraham Senor, they both signed a special agreement with Ferdinand and Isabella about tax farming for the next 4 years. So they didn't see this coming at all. And this shocked the Abarbanel. He could not believe this was happening. He could not believe this. Oh my gosh, it's so crazy. So the Abarbanel, he's stuck. It's not good. Oh, let's get back to that for a moment. Sorry? Okay. Yeah. So the Abarbanel, he ends up running off. First, he runs to Lisbon. And while in Lisbon, that's where the topic of our shiur tonight. So the eldest son of Abarbanel was a person named Yehuda. Yehuda was actually named after his own father, whose name was also Yehuda, which is quite cool because my son Chaim is awesome. My dad's name is Chaim, very Sephardic. It's awesome. My grandfather, Yosef, that's my name, Yosef. It's awesome. You could tell it's an old Sephardic minhag. And he was the private physician to Ferdinand and Isabella. And Ferdinand and Isabella were saying over and over again, please stay, please convert. We don't want you to go. We want you to continue taking care of us. Just take the baptism. And Judah said, no, I'm not going to. And he ends up sending his own son, whose name was Yitzchak, going back to that, his son, and he sends him away to Lisbon to run away. Unfortunately, like we mentioned before, John II, not a good guy. He's contacted by Ferdinand and Isabella, and they actually take the baby. They take the baby, and they baptize the baby. And this baby, unfortunately, never, ever, ever came back to the family again. And this is horrible. And the only reason we even know about this is because of this incredible poem. So please turn to source 4. This is what Judah Abarbanel himself wrote. And this is it's just heartbreaking. This is translated by a professor from JPS, Raymond P. Scheinlin. Really fantastic. Time with its pointed shafts has hit my heart and split my gut, laid open my entrails, landed me a blow that will not heal. Knocked me down, left me in lasting pain. Time wounded me, wasted away my flesh, used up my blood and fat in suffering, ground my bones to meal, and rampage leapt, attacked me like a lion in his rage. Page 3. He did not stop at whirling me around, exiling me while yet my days were green, sending me stumbling drunk to roam the world, spinning me dizzy round about its edge, so that I've spent 2 decades on the move without my horses ever catching breath, so that my palms have measured oceans, weighed the dust of continents, so that my spring is spent. No, that was not enough. He chased my friends from me, exiled my age mates, sent my family far, so that I never see a face I know. Father, mother, brothers, or a friend. He scattered everyone I care for northward, eastward, or to the west, so that I have no rest from constant thinking, planning, and never a moment's peace for all my plans. Now that I see my future in the east, their separation clutches at my heels. My foot is turned to go, but my heart's at sea. I can't tell forward from behind. Yes, time, my bear, my wolf, ate up my heart cleft in it too and cut into bits, so that it aches with groaning panic, blunder, confiscation, lost captivity. But even this was not enough for him. He also seeks to snuff my spark, exterminate my line. 2 sons were born to me, 2 splendid sons, 2 precious, noble, handsome sons. The younger I named Samuel. Time, my watchful overseer, confiscated him, struck him down just 5 years old, and all that grew from him was misery. The elder I called Isaac Abarbanel. After the quarry where I myself was hewn, after one of Israel's greats, his grandfather, a man, a match for David, lamp upon the west. At birth I saw that he was good, his heart a fitting sight for wisdom, apt repository for the goods, his forebears handed down through me. He was just 1 year old, alas, when time, moving on to page 4, the enemy ever at my heels took him away. The day the king of Spain expelled the Jews, he ordered that a watch be set for me, so I not slip away through mountain passes, and that my child still nursing should be seized, and brought into his faith on his behalf. A good man got word to me in time, a friend. I sent him with his wet nurse in the dark of midnight, just like smuggled goods to Portugal, then ruled by a wicked king, who earlier had nearly ruined me. For in his father's time, a worthy king, my father had achieved success and health and wealth. Then this one followed him, a grasping thing, a man but with the cravings of a dog. His courtiers and his brothers schemed revolt. He thwarted them and killed his brother then. Alleging that my father was with them, he tried to kill him too. But God, the rider of the clouds, preserved his life. My father fled to Castile, home of my ancestors, my family source. But as for me, the king seized all my gold and silver, took as forfeit everything I owned. Now, seeing that my child was in his land, and learning that I planned to join my father's house in Italy, the king detained my child and gave command that none should send my stray lamb back to me. And lie dead, a foolish king arose, fanatical and hollow in the head, who violated all the house of Jacob, turned my noble people to his faith. Many killed themselves rather than transgress the law of God, our help in need. My darling boy was taken, and his good name, the name of the rock from which I was hewn, changed. He's 12 years old. I haven't seen him since. So are my sins repaid. I rage, but only at myself. There's no one else but me to bear the blame. I chased him from your troubles to a trap. I drove him from mere sparks into a flame. Page 5. I hope to see him heartsick with my endless hope. Oh, dear gazelle, what makes you tarry so? Why do you thus crush a father's heart? Why do you aim your arrows at my innermost parts? Why do you dim the fight by sending clouds and make the shining seem like night to me? The moon is always darkened in my sight. My star is blotted out by clouds. No sun's rays ever penetrates my home or crosses my doorsill to reach my beams. My roses never bloom on Sharon's plain. My grasses never feel the driving rain. You steal my very sleep with the thought of you. Am I sleeping or awake? I cannot tell. I cannot touch my food, for even honey stings, and sweets taste venomous to me. Miserably I nibble coal-burnt crust, moistening with tears my dried-out bread. My only drink is water mixed with tears. The blood of grapes does not come near my mouth. I'm drunk with nothing more than water, like a Nazarite of one of Rechab's sons. But when I dream of your return, and when I picture in my mind's eye how you look, how good my fortune seems. The rose returns to dress my cheek in sanguine once again. I sleep and find sleep sweet. I wake refreshed, delighting in your lingering image. The water that I drink is sweet, and even earth tastes sweet when I imagine you are here. But when I think about our separation, here blasts my heart, a desert wind within. I seem like one dismayed or in a faint, diminished somehow and reduced in size. And the thought of you is joy to me and pain. Tonic and torment arc from you. Balm and bane. I have your image graven on my heart, but also our separation is my core. And any joy your image brings to me cannot outweigh the reproach your absence speaks. Your absence frustrates all my plans. Your exile blocks, diverts my roads. And he just continues and continues and continues. What we have over here is the very vivid description of his own son getting stolen from him and his hope that he'll be able to see him once again. Unfortunately, according to most scholars, he was never given that opportunity, and he never was able to see his own son again. Don Yitzchak Abarbanel ends up moving to Naples. His son ended up writing a fantastic book called something about love. It's this fantastic tract on philosophy. Very, very famous. Very, very famous. It was translated into many different languages. In addition, the Abarbanel, all of the times that he had such problems really led to tremendous amount of creativity. The amount of creativity that he had was during those low times. And the Abarbanel himself blames himself. He says, the reason why all of these horrible things are happening to me is specifically due to one reason, is because I have forgotten about Torah. And since I forgot about Torah, it must be all of my travails and all my troubles are all because I'm not devoted enough. So when he's kicked out of Lisbon, the short time he had before taking a position with Ferdinand and Isabella, that short time, he ends up in just the span of 4 months writing his Perush on Yoshua, on Shoftim, on Shmuel. It is incredible. The amount of writing a person needs to write to even think, just to copy over the Abarbanel. For him to have written all of this, it's really such an amazing thing. You could tell he had all of these ideas in his head, and really all it took was him to have time to write it down. Later on, when he gets, unfortunately, kicked out of Spain, and he ends up in Italy, he also has a period of creativity. And that's why he writes all sorts of special Sfarim, specifically about Messianism, because he believed, which makes a lot of sense for him in that context, he believed that Mashiach was right around the corner. And therefore, he's trying to put the events, all of that, into his own context, and by saying that it must be that Mashiach is coming. So a lot of his writing is very, very much based on Mashiach, which is quite interesting. In addition, he has all sorts of biographical ideas. And what I love so much, and I shared this with my social studies class, he's very, very anti-monarchy. And this over here comes from a fantastic article by a great professor of mine, Chaim Angel. I know Eitan Ariel, this looks a little bit familiar. So Abarbanel, he actually takes the view of Rav Rai, that using those words we used again, that it's a b'diavad. When the Torah commands us, som tasi malach hamelech, when the Torah says you need to appoint a king, the Abarbanel says, no, it doesn't mean you need to appoint a king. It's a reshut. It's b'diavad to have a king. In fact, he talks all about how the government in Naples is really the best way of doing things. What I love so much about this is that you see a whole strain of thought, because the Abarbanel was translated into many different languages. And the Abarbanel had a big impact on Christian Hebraists. And they translated his work. And one of these works, this is all brought down in a fantastic book that I brought here called The Hebrew Republic. Really fantastic, from a professor, Eric Nelson from Harvard, where he shows a lot of these ideas of the Abarbanel ended up going into the general consciousness and ended up in a lot of very interesting places. One place would be Milton, where Milton talks about the proper way to have a government. And it's translated into Latin, and who ends up reading it? Thomas Paine. And Thomas Paine, in his book Common Sense, don't worry, I brought the books. Thomas Paine, in his book Common Sense, even though Thomas Paine was an atheist, and in fact, he only had 4 people at his funeral because he was so hated at his own time. Thomas Paine himself says a lot of these arguments at Abarbanel, that King George III, that monarchy is a bad idea, and that having a monarch is only a b'diavad. And the best thing is really having a type of democracy. And he writes this in Common Sense. What I love so much is that there's a bit of a back and forth between him and John Adams, where John Adams, who was initially friends with him, he writes to him, he says, I don't get it. You know how silly this is. You don't believe Thomas Paine. You don't believe in the Bible. So why are you marshaling all sorts of biblical proof? So what's amazing is that Thomas Paine ends up writing. He says, yeah, I know I don't believe it, but at least other people will. At least other people will. And that's why we even see the thought of the Abarbanel even coming to today. And we'll finish with this, guys. Oh, there's so much to talk about, but I don't. Oh, the Abarbanel. The Abarbanel was very, very well respected. In fact, I heard a beautiful story from Rabbi Dr. David Katz from Baltimore, where he said some people were a little bit upset about certain ideas of the Abarbanel. Because like we mentioned, he quotes Christian scholars. He doesn't mind disagreeing with Chazal, and he's very pshat-oriented. So for all of those reasons, it's not necessarily mikubal in the yeshivish world. And there were some people that wanted to take the Abarbanel Svarim out of the Ner Yisrael base medrash. They asked Rabbi Ruderman, and Rabbi Ruderman said, no way. The Kesef Mishnah, the great Rav Yosef Karo, calls the Abarbanel HaNesher HaGadol, the great eagle. Very few people are called that. Maybe the Rambam. I can't even think about so many people named the Nesher HaGadol. Yet, if this is how Rav Yosef Karo refers to the Abarbanel, that must mean he's accepted. And that means that even though we might not agree with everything he says, nevertheless, his books are still part of our canon. What a difference, centuries make. Because, first of all, my name should be on that list. But first of all, you see the Abarbanel, second down. Spanish citizenship. Who would ever see a time? Who would ever think that the very place where the Jews had so many issues, where you have a horrible government that ends up capturing with Portugal the grandson of the Abarbanel and baptizing him and turning him into a Christian, that this same country, to a certain degree, would bestow citizenship upon Jews? It's amazing. It's amazing. This is that's the top left over there, if you guys see. That's my top right for you guys. That's the town of Kassorla. Yeah, I could just show it to them. I don't want Spanish citizenship, but if they ever want to give me, I guess I'll take it. I don't know. And then at the bottom over here, this Jerry Siegel gave to me, Mr. Jerry Siegel, from 1992, where a whole bunch, 130 different descendants of Yitzhak Abarbanel end up coming together. It's very strange. Some of the descendants, they ended up not Jewish. Some of them ended up being totally Jewish. It goes back and forth. In fact, one of the major theologians, Muslim theologians from the time of Shabtai Tzvi was actually an Enoch de Abarbanel. It's so strange how these things happen, just moving from place to place. What's very cool is that there happens to be from 1968, a baseball player. I was reading this in the article. They were all hoping that Mickey Abarbanel, who passed away in 2015 in Tampa, they were hoping he would show up because he was a former ball player. He didn't show up to this meeting of the Abarbanels. However, there's a card that's even more important for 1968. Anyone know? Nolan Ryan's rookie card from 1968, which costs $1,500 on eBay. The one on the left you get for 99 cents. It's cool for us because of Abarbanel. It's very cool. So to end all of this, unfortunately, as we've learned throughout all of our lectures and from all of the amazing rabbis who have given, things have never been easy for us. However, what's so incredible for us is that us Jews, we continue no matter what. We have so many issues. Rabbis on the run, but yet look what they've been able to do. The Abarbanel, even when things were so bad, so much production, always believing in Hashem, always going ahead and rising up from the ashes and really becoming something incredible. I want to thank you so much for coming. Have a wonderful night.